Welcome back. NFT transactions will almost double to 40 million transactions globally in about 5 years' time, according to a research report by our next guest. Joining us now is Nick Maynard, head of research at Juniper Research. Welcome to the show, Nick. So I see that Juniper Research has found that the global number of NFT transactions will rise from 24 million in 2022 to about 40 million by 2027. Maybe you can walk us through this report.
Sure, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you this morning. So, as you said, we're anticipating that those transactions are going to reach 40 million globally by 2027. And I think that's for a number of reasons. We've seen a massive increase in the amount of interest in NFTs, and that's really interesting to me that that's happening at a time where, as you've been discussing, there's been quite a lot of uncertainty in the crypto market. So actually for that to be seen now shows that NFTs are doing well. One of the major points we made in our press release on this topic was that one of the main elements that will drive this is the metaverse segment, which has pretty good growth in terms of NFTs being created. However, we did also mention in that press release, and I think it's really important to note that there are a few issues with NFTs in terms of how it's perceived and issues it's had around being sources for elements such as scams and criminal activity. So I think the next 5 years are a really good opportunity for vendors in the space to really prove the value of NFTs and really make sure that they are perceived in a more positive way. So I think it's such an interesting time to be looking at this market. I think there's a lot to unpack here.
I want to offer a counterpoint here, because you said NFTs are doing well, I think you said, and I'm just seeing an ARCA report showing that NFTs are down over 80% year to date in value, and transactions on OpenSea are down astronomically as well. So how do you square that with the value of NFTs as an investment and the transaction volumes? And if you're an investor and you're seeing the value of NFT go down, should you just keep holding, keep calm, carry on?
I think what we're seeing is that this is a longer term view, and that's why all of our reports take this 5-year approach, is that you do need to take this longer term view of what NFTs look like. I think at the moment you're quite right. We're in this crypto slump. We've seen really big impacts of these kinds of elements, but actually over the longer term we think that NFTs are robust enough as a concept and a market to really get through the other end of this. And there are some great prospects for NFTs as collectibles in certain markets. Gaming, for example, is one that a lot has been made of. So I think what we're seeing is there's a more long-term look here, and that's really what you need to be focusing on in the NFT market. Yes, the short-term picture is not as rosy, but I think the longer-term one is a different case entirely.
So, Nick, you see the market broken up into, it looks like, was it like 7 different sectors, basically, the NFT market, and that each one seems incredibly different. So you have art is one, collectibles is a different one, fashion, gaming, metaverse, music, and real estate. Of that group, which do you see as being the most promising for investors? And that as the first question. Second of all, what's ultimately the driving factor behind the value of an NFT? This is a question that keeps coming up. People ask me all the time, how do you price these things? How do you value these things? What gives an NFT its value? And going forward, right? Not what we've seen over the past year, but going forward, where do you see that driving? Which one of those factors will drive value as well?
Sure. So taking the first part of that question, so looking at those segments involved, I think really a really interesting one is gaming. Gaming's been a really interesting market for a number of reasons. We've seen quite a lot of video game developers and publishers focusing on NFTs as a way to add sort of a sort of a way for players to collect items and become more involved in games. The reaction to that and the response from gamers hasn't necessarily always been positive. So it's interesting to note that that is an issue here. However, that being said, I do think that gaming has stronger possibilities in future, particularly given, as you were discussing earlier, the upcoming change to how Ethereum works will definitely take away quite a lot of the negative connotations to this, particularly the environmental element of NFTs, which has been much discussed and criticised. I think in terms of the value, now this is a really interesting topic in terms of the value of NFTs, and it's something that is really, really complicated. The straightforward answer is essentially it's worth as much as somebody will pay for it, and that might seem glib, right. And that's a rather obvious way of looking at it. But really, at the moment, what we're seeing is that the market is so uncertain in terms of you have massive record-setting NFT sales. You have the difficulty in selling some NFTs that have been bought at those high prices. So actually establishing what the trend looks like is quite tricky. I think what we'll see over time is we're very likely to see less of the headline-grabbing extreme NFT prices, but a more sensible sort of price going forward that is more reasonable in how it's seen.
I also see you distinguish between regions and countries with respect to their interest in NFTs. Maybe you can go over the top three.
Sure. So the country and region one is always an interesting way to look at it. We saw that there was likely to be quite a lot of growth in the North American market. We think that's been a place where there has been quite a lot of interest so far. And we've seen just a lot of crypto interest to date in that market. Outside of that, if you look at some of the other markets involved, rest of Asia Pacific struck us as quite a promising area in terms of there was a lot of interest in markets such as Singapore and those kinds of markets, which you wouldn't necessarily think. On the other side, Europe is perhaps a bit behind in terms of NFT adoption to date, and we think that is sort of lagging behind for a number of reasons. Sort of the concerns around some of those elements, such as the environmental concern and the impact of minting new NFTs is sort of a limiting factor there.